Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
Welcome back to Going in Raw Count Out. It's another top 10 list. Today, we're talking about shocking departures from companies. The departures of talent where you're like, what? What was the impetus? You came up with this idea. Explain why.
We've done a lot of like free agent signings, good, bad, in an era that we're getting back into in the world of wrestling. People are going back and forth between companies now. There's actual real talent for competition.
Yeah.
Competition for talent. Flip that.
But there is talent out there for the competition.
Yes. It thought occurred to me, well, we've done a bunch of free agent themed lists, even just as recently as last year. Let's take a different tact. Let's look at it from a different angle. Not necessarily free agent signings, people retiring, leaving, getting fired. The shocking departures from wrestling companies.
That's right. And they may or may not have reemerged elsewhere. Their debuts or returns to companies, not the point here. It's the departure that we're talking about. So let's go ahead and dive right into this, Larson, with number 10.
10.
The Elite leave New Japan Professional Wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense, Kenny Omega, Young Bucks, Hangman Adam Page, Cody Rhodes. You could make the case the Elite brand was just as, perhaps even more popular than Bullet Club by end of 2019. Is that right? No, beginning of 2019, end of 2018. What?
Do you remember, you're bringing up that point, even when we first started watching New Japan in 2017, when they really exploded out here with that January Wrestle Kingdom, as you started to understand the dynamics of Bullet Club and who is in Bullet Club, if you know, like the eagle-eyed viewers even back then would notice that the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, Hangman really wasn't too much, he came in a little bit later, but certainly the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, especially when they started that being the Elite stuff, it was like, oh, they're wearing the Elite logo more than they were Bullet Club logo. And that ended up being a bit of foreshadowing for what you're talking about here.
Exactly. So if you go further back to the summer of 2018, All In, the first one, in Chicago. You know, it was kind of their mission statement. You know, there was a tweet that Meltzer responded to about Ring of Honor not be able to sell out a 10,000-seat building. And Cody says, I'll take that bet.
Yeah.
And so the Elite put together and put on a show with the help of Ring of Honor and New Japan. Put on the first All In, and they sold out the Sears Center. I don't remember what the name of the building is now. Regardless, in suburban Chicago, and that Tony Khan seeing Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega at Tokyo Dome, those two events seemingly got the ball rolling for the birth of All Elite Wrestling. And, you know, by the time the end of 2018 rolled around, and all the members of the Elite were free agents. As mentioned, the Elite's brand was just as prominent, just as popular, maybe, as Bullet Club. And obviously, they probably had all sorts of options. They could return to New Japan. They could stay in Ring of Honor. Probably could have gone to WWE. But it was pretty darn surprising that they decided, with Tony Khan, to start a brand new wrestling promotion. You know, and I know there had been the graphics leaked early, you know, when they were filing for trademarks. We saw those and you're like, oh, that can't be a real thing. They're not starting a promotion.
I was going real. I think you and I had the thing going where, you know, we were doing good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
And I was like, not a chance. Because I went back and I watched this again the other day, our reaction to this. And it was the headline was Chris Jericho and Jim Ross starting a new promotion. And all the details were there, but Jericho and Jim Ross seemed to be spearheading this alongside Tony Khan. And, oh, by the way, also with them, the Elite, who it was reported that they were in talks with WWE at a certain point. I remember there was a rumor that one of the offers on the table included a 6-month out clause if they weren't happy with their booking. That's how bad WWE's booking reputation was. Their creative reputation was so in the toilet that believable rumors were popping up that they would have a 6-month out clause if they didn't like their creative, which is kind of crazy And I don't even know if that was ever actually confirmed.
Yeah,
or
I don't
not.
know either. I mean, so
But
while
it was believable. It was like, man, they've got to offer this,
Yeah, yeah. And while, again, it might not be the most shocking development to see the Elite leave New Japan and Ring of Honor, to see them do that plus start their own wrestling promotion in the process. Remember at the time being like, what the heck? Never expected a brand new promotion to come out of this.
Seemingly, I think it was Matt, I want to say, and I could be wrong about that, but I swear like there was a rumor, also a report out, or somebody said that they had offered New Japan and Ring of Honor, hey, we'll stay if you guys each want to pitch in, half, but like each of you would be paying for us as if we're exclusive for you, but we would be on both, in both companies. It's just they wanted that much money. And they refused, and instead they helped build their, major U.S. competitor, because at the time New Japan obviously wanted a big U.S. invasion, and that did not happen because of All Elite Wrestling. And they helped start that because of the All In situation, and they probably could have avoided it several times, but that didn't happen. I mean, hey, in the end, maybe it just would have been Chris Jericho and Jim Ross, wrestling in the ring together. Maybe that would have been AEW on TNT.
It would have been 2 hours every Wednesday night.
Right. I'm the learning tree. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to number 9. Kurt Angle makes his impact in TNA. I remember this being pretty darn surprising.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at his Wikipedia entry here, and Angle in so after let's see here. This was in 2006. Mm-hmm. On the June 27th episode of ECW, he lost to RVD for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. He appeared sporadically through the rest of the year, and then on August 25th, Angle was granted an early release from his contract for health reasons. He claimed in his documentary that he asked for his relief because he could not take time off and was working hurt, severely so on some occasion. And he also stated when he quit, WWE lost their top talent. He was the very top of their payroll. He wrestled his last match in August 14th at an ECW house show. He beat Danny Doring on his way out. And much to the surprise of people in WWE, he landed in TNA.
Yeah. I guess the expectation or the thought was he'd get his release, he'd go get himself healthy, heal up from injuries, and I guess come back. It's WWE, but that's not what happened. He showed up in TNA instead. And that was pretty darn surprising because from 2000 till 2006, he was one of the top guys in the company.
Yeah,
won the world title several times. WrestleMania main events, main evented tons of pay-per-views. Mm-hmm. In a short span of time, he was a rookie in the pro wrestling world to being one of the most accomplished wrestlers of his generation. And for him to take his leave from WWE and then show up in TNA, where obviously the schedule is far more friendly to someone who's battling injuries, where you're not on the road 300 days a year. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what TNA's shooting schedule is like in 2006. I don't know how often they were having house shows.
Yeah.
But you got to think far fewer dates than you'd have to work in WWE. Plus, at that time, TNA was getting pretty decent ratings, so he probably made a pretty good chunk of money.
Well,
probably
he was
working fewer dates.
He was at the according to Kurt Angle, he was at the top of the WWE payroll. He was one of their highest paid, if not their highest paid worker there. They had him in ECW, and so I don't know exactly what if TNA would have ponied up. TNA seemingly has never had a problem with money. They seemingly have always had money. But they ponied up for him. And I remember some shade being thrown at him. I think it was by Jim Ross. I don't know, it was a blog post or a tweet or whatever. But I remember reading that, and a lot of people in the internet wrestling community back in 2006, whenever it was like, oh man, Jim Ross not happy about this because Kurt Angle, I guess, was like, hey man, I'm really hurt. I got to get out of here. Can I please, going to get on my contract early? And then he was, oh man, Kurt Angle, sure thing. Go ahead, go do it. Come back. And then he just didn't do that. So who knows what kind of bridges were burned. But, hey, he had a hell of a run in TNA. A lot of great matches there. And eventually, I mean, it took a long time, but he came back to WWE as a member of the Shield.
Yeah, he did. Even for one night only, member of Shield.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to number 8.
Another member of Shield.
Yeah, Sierra, Hotel, India, Echo, Dean Ambrose goes all in on Mox. Man, this was weird because of the way also WWE handled it. So
doesn't usually happen that way. So it was early 2019. It looks like January. I'm looking back at our list of videos here. January 2019, I think it was when the rumors started coming out that Ambrose was not going to renew his WWE deal and was going to leave the company. At that point, it was a situation similar to Kurt Angle's in a lot of ways. When a short amount of time, he did a lot.
Yeah.
On the main roster, the Shield got called up in 2014?
2014, yeah.
So,
or late? No,
it was November 2014, right?
They split. No, they split in June of 2014.
Oh, it must have been 2012 then.
It was 2012. Yeah,
2012.
It was November. Yeah, November. Survivor
That's
Series
right.
2012.
So, a span of 6.5 years. Again, multi-time world champion, won tag titles, all the mid-card belts. And to see someone of that stature with that much, having accomplished that much, saying, nope, I'm out of here, was surprising. And then WWE, after the rumors got out that he was leaving, actually issued a statement saying, Jonathan Goods decided not to renew his contract. We wish him the best going forward.
And there was also the weird thing of like, why are you calling him that?
Yeah.
It was like, this is serious, people. It's Jonathan Good.
Yeah.
It's a real guy. He's leaving.
Yeah. So it was pretty surprising in terms of how it was handled by WWE. On top of that, it was surprising. We didn't exactly know all the goings on backstage, obviously. We learned that later. He was on Talk with Jericho. But from the outside, it was somewhat surprising that he would go, given all he'd already accomplished. But maybe given that he'd already accomplished so much and what he was doing prior to his departure, you could tell he wasn't exactly into.
Yeah.
That's when it was shortly before, like, the rumors came out that he was leaving. They had that bit in the doctor's office where he got the shot, and there was just a lot of bad creative he was dealing with at the time.
The Bane gimmick thing where he had the mask and all the dudes. And then there was also, this predates this a couple of years, but the Stone Cold podcast where it seemed kind of clear that there was a disconnect of some sort, even as champion. And then you find out later that, it's exactly what you think it is. Vince McMahon, according to Mox, thought that he understood his character better than Dean Ambrose, than Mox did. And so you'd get stupid, goofy shit like the big hat when they're in Vegas and this, that, the other. And it's just, it's kind of clear the guy was phoning it in at a certain point. And then you find out that last, like the Shield's last call or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That last house show event with his last match, he got paid like $600 or
$500.
Oh, it was $500. Okay. So on his way out, they were like, yeah, whatever. But he was a big deal, and I think it'd be a big deal if he ever came back. And I don't know. He seems perfectly happy doing what he's doing. At the same time, maybe if there's any part of him that's sentimental, and understanding that, who knows how many more days Roman Reigns has as a wrestler if he's interested in doing a super part-time schedule with the new regime there. Maybe when his contract's up, Triple H could make a pitch to him. I don't know. He's one of those guys. I wouldn't rule it out. I also wouldn't be shocked if he never went back. But yeah, in terms of his departure, especially at the time when like there hadn't really been that big of a name go to New Japan. Like we saw people, AJ Styles, Shinsuke, whoever, come from there, but for like a WrestleMania main event level guy to go over there.
Well, Jericho had the matches in New Japan before.
Was that right? That was like right before though. And okay, so the difference is you're right.
But it wasn't like Jericho was a full-time WWE roster member like right before that happened either.
And like you could argue that Ambrose was super relevant
Oh, yeah.
in WWE
Obviously,
at the
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Jericho's peak in WWE. I mean, you could argue it was Festival of Friendship. I'd say it's probably a little bit earlier than that. But yeah, no, and Jericho was shocking. Jericho was shocking too.
Yeah.
And to see two big names like that go, one that was like just off of like, you know, a huge run in WWE was like a big signifier of like, oh my God, like fucking anything can happen. And then we see with AEW, you know,
Yeah.
it
Him
got
showing
pretty
up at
crazy.
Double or Nothing 2019. And
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
paradigm shift, if you will, huh?
Let's move on to number 7.
7.
The Rainmaker leaves New Japan Pro Wrestling. A lot of people thought Kazuchika Okada would be in New Japan like sort of forever, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was their top guy for the better part of a decade. You know, breaking virtually every record when it comes to holding the IWGP World title. And it was pretty darn surprising when New Japan issued a statement, I don't know, shortly after Wrestle Kingdom this year, saying that Okada was not going to re-sign. And he had some dates already booked through January and February and fulfilled those dates before showing up in AEW full time. But it was pretty darn surprising. I know there was a lot of talk about the possibility of him leaving, about maybe going to WWE. Of course, given AEW's relationship with New Japan, the fact that Okada had already wrestled a few times in AEW, you know, it was a distinct possibility. But until it happened, I was like, oh, I mean, that seemed like a small chance he's going to leave. But, you know, as I mentioned, he broke virtually every record as it relates to the world title there, held numerous other belts. And, you know, at this point in his career, maybe it's time to move on and give other challenges a try.
I don't know if he's ever. Do you recall if he's talked about the reasons for leaving New Japan? I mean, I kind of assume it's what you're talking about. I know a lot of people were surprised also because his wife is like a big pop star. She's a big celebrity.
Yeah. Before he left, I know he gave an interview, but the thing I remember about that interview is that he said he's never returning to New Japan in that interview. I believe that's what it was.
Yeah. What's he gonna do? What's happening with him at Forbidden Door? Do we know?
I don't think he's booked for anything yet.
Oh wow. Okay, I'm not booked.
But we're still a couple weeks out.
We got 2 weeks left.
But I mean,
So-
like, I don't know, like the former New Japan guys, because Jay White last year didn't have a match at Forbidden Door, did he?
Well, yeah. No, you bring a good point.
But his
though,
situation is a little different because he lost a loser leaves New Japan match.
Yeah, I
to
don't
Eddie
think
Kingston,
he can
so.
be there in kayfabe. But there was also that period of time when the management there in New Japan was seemingly not too like the talent wasn't too happy with the management there. So who knows? I mean, you know, obviously right now New Japan is in a bit of a rebuilding phase. You know, they're trying to build up some young talent, get them to that next level so they can revisit those 2017 highs again. And maybe the idea was Okada wasn't going to factor into that. And they were like, yeah, we don't really have any, like, you've done everything. There's nothing left really for you to do except to, I don't know, maybe get other people over. And maybe that was the reason, because it seems like that might be logical. And he looks across the pond and he's like, well, look at that. Look what they got going on over there in the States. You know, I'm going to go be all elite.
Yeah.
And of course, WWE, you know, tried to use Shinsuke Nakamura a push with them seemingly to lure Kazuchika Okada over. But Rainmaker wasn't having it, Larson.
Not having. I got the full quote here from Tokyo Sports. That's where the interview was from. Okada says, I'm already looking ahead to what's next. I'm going out with the intention of never coming back to New Japan. I'm sorry about that, but I don't think so. Of course, I want to treasure the feeling and the words I received. So, not exactly talking about motivation for leaving, but, you know, seemingly make it clear the intention right now, as of him leaving, was not to come back to the company.
I wonder if that's one of those things, this is me purely speculating, where, number one, I wonder if there is something more, if there's more context in the translation. And number two, if maybe there is, I don't know if it's a turn of phrase or if it's to be dramatic about it and be like, hey, where I go is going to be a big deal because I'm never coming back here again, to make his eventual return a big deal. He's a showman. They all are. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how they approach the Forbidden Door stuff with him, if he's going to be involved at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyways.
Definitely. You would hope so. You would hope so. I mean, at the least, you'd hope the Elite as a unit would have a match. The new Elite, sorry.
The new Elite.
Well, Jack Perry's going to be the ladder match, so it'll have to be the Young Bucks and Okada.
Yeah.
Against House of Torture. How about that? Okada revisiting his rivalry
why he
against
left.
Evil. Yeah,
because the manager was like, listen, Rainmaker, we're going all in on House of Torture.
If he had just stuck around till Tanahashi took over, it's one of his 10 points.
That's his dudes.
No more House of Torture interference.
Remember? Oh, I guarantee Okada would have been number 1 point. He'd be like all Rainmaker all the time.
Yeah.
We want to recreate the Ultimo Dragon picture, but with Rainmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what it was? He was probably like, listen, guys, I really just want to have a 3-year-long program with Yano for the King of Pro Wrestling stuff, for the Kazuchika Okada Pro Wrestling title. And they were like, dude, I know you probably really enjoy comedy wrestling. He was like, okay, good. And he was like, no, we're not going to do that.
Happy we're in agreement, yes.
Fine. I quit then if you're not going to let me do that. So, yeah, he's like, I want my own comedy DVD. Like Yano.
Yes. That's what he wants. He wants to carry it around to the ring.
He wants to be Yano Okada. Anyways, before I move on to the next one, of course, Larson, we've got our Friendo Club setup that we try to push on the Friendos as much as we can. We're in the middle of, I think, yes, we are, the Big Blue Predictions Challenge Month of Champions here in June with Forbidden Door right around the corner. The final chapter of Month of Champions. Who will emerge victorious as the Big Blue Predictions Champion? If you want in on the predictions challenges that we do, get the Friendo Club setup. We offer 2 ways to get it. Patreon.com/Steven Larson. Click on Friendo Club setup or click join right here at youtube.com/Steven Larson. You also get bonus episodes and access to our question threads. In addition, if you could do us a solid, hit that subscribe button and the notify bell. And of course, that thumbs up, that like button really goes a long way towards helping Going in Raw. If you're listening to this in the audio realm, do us a solid, leave us a rating, a review, or a comment. Let's get into number 6. Lex Luger wanders into WCW.
It's interesting when he left WCW to join the World Bodybuilding Federation too. But that's not what we're talking about, per se. We're talking about when he left after going to WB. Going to WCW and just wandering.
Really, we need to talk. This is about departures.
Yeah. So when he leaves WB and goes to WCW, this story I always find kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's like the Wild West nature of pro wrestling for a good majority of its existence, where someone will be in one company one day and another company the next. Like contracts are merely an idea as opposed to an ironclad legal document, And to paraphrase, the story goes that Eric Bischoff was looking for a major surprise for the very first edition of Nitro in September of '95. And Sting reached out to Lex Luger to see what his availability would be. And Luger's like, yeah, I don't have a contract. And even though Bischoff didn't like Luger personally or professionally and lowballed him with the contract offer, it was like outrageously less than he was making in WWF at the time. Luger, being so dissatisfied with his creative with WWF, took it.
Oh, and being supremely confident, because I think there was like incentives where Bischoff was like, if we're happy with your work, then you'll get paid accordingly. And blew past any conceivable ceiling. He beat Hulk Hogan in 97.
97, a mere 2 years later. So out he wanders in that debut episode of Nitro. In the Mall of America, that train store is right behind him. The famous shot of him in his puffy shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Wandering out, and it was legitimately a surprise, I think, to people in WCW, people watching Nitro, and seemingly a lot of people within WWF.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Who he didn't give any sort of notice to, but he, if his contract had expired, I don't think he was obligated to do that.
You didn't give notice your contract expired.
So yeah, it's a humorous moment in the annals of going in Raw.
Yeah.
But it was pretty darn shocking for the time, and it's kind of set the table of what we were to expect during the Attitude Era, where we saw a lot of talent going back and forth between companies.
Well, it's also kind of crazy. I love this. I'm looking at his Wikipedia entry for the World Bodybuilding Federation because, yeah, he loses at Super Brawl 2 in 92. And then he negotiated a departure and joined, it was Vince's deal, the World Bodybuilding Federation, appearing regularly as a co-host on its Saturday morning program, WBF Body Stars. I am desperate to get on YouTube now and find some of that and Twitch stream it.
And it was around that time that he got in that motorcycle accident and busted up his arm.
That's exactly right. So he was slated to guest pose. So, like, away from the competition, he was just going to go and, hey, look, there's this other guy who's going to pose. This is Lex Luger at a WBF pay-per-view event. But he was injured in a motorcycle accident. By the time he got better from the motorcycle accident in July of 92, the WBF was out of business. So that motorcycle, you never know. If that one guest pose spot could have just blown up the WBF into a big-time deal. And today we might be a bodybuilding podcast. Oh, man, what's that? Who's Triple H taking over the WBF booking? What's going to happen at Body Mania? It's just two dudes in the main event.
Body
posing.
Mania, yeah.
Oh, man.
It's the Lex Luger Invitational.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also kind of crazy that, like, yeah, this dude, he main evented SummerSlam. He beat Yokozuna by count out. He was a Lex Express. Vince McMahon, was considering him for the Hogan spot. Like, he did a couple dudes, like, Sid. I guess to a degree, Bret Hart.
I guess, yeah. It's interesting because in his his biography, the A&E biography, Luger's, talking about that, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, where there's one bit where Bruce Pritchard's being interviewed talking about Luger's experience on the Lex Express, and Luger, understandably, not being always enthusiastic about being stuck on a bus driving across the country, doing constant appearances, and they looked at his very human response to being away from his family, being on the road for months at a time, and being at times grumpy about it, as this guy doesn't want it.
He doesn't have it. Yeah.
He must not want the top spot.
Who else in the history of wrestling had to deal with that shit?
I can't think of anybody.
Oh, man. His last official match was at a house show teaming with Shawn Michaels, defeating Owen Hart and Yokozuna.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Owen Hart and Yokozuna by DQ.
Sounds like a WWE house show.
It sounds like a WWE house show. Let's move on to this next one because I love this shit. Number 5. Ric Flair takes the big pixelated gold, the mosaic filter belt, to WWE. So Ric Flair and NWA/WCW were basically synonymous by 1991.
Yep.
But something happened backstage that led Ric Flair to want to beat feet. And that thing backstage was Jim Herd.
Yeah.
So this quote here is from a conversation. What is this? With MediaMan.com.au. I don't know about that, but I'm getting this from the Sportster, so it has to be true. He said this, allegedly.
Who,
Jim
Flair?
Herd is the... What's that?
Flair said that, yeah.
Flair said this, yeah. Jim Herd is the total reason I left. He had a lot to do with the destruction and bankruptcy of the company 10 years before it did go bankrupt. He'll go down as the biggest idiot of all time. It was nothing I did. You have a right to protect yourself. It came about over $25,000. There was a time in my life when I thought I was invincible. I knew I was the best at what I did. I never thought of myself better than other people in any other way, apart from the wrestling where I knew I was the best wrestler alive. I went from that character to a guy who was forced to cut his hair, a guy who Jim Herd wanted to wear an earring. He wanted to make me into a gladiator. He says he was taking an established commodity who'd been the flagship of the company and changing it stupidly. When the NWA was in existence, it was controlled by a board of directors. Whoever the champion was, they had to put up a $25,000 bond. It was a statement to say that the champion wouldn't leave with the belt. I put up a bond for $25,000, and when I asked for my money back, Herd said, "Fuck you and the belt." Flair was absolutely livid at Herd, who he warned about his anger. I said, "It's not fuck me, it's fuck you. Watch where the belt is next Monday." I called Vince and I said, "I'll come to the WWF as a champion if you want me to be." He said, "I sent the belt to WWE and Bobby Heenan took it out to TV the next week."
Again,
So
crazy that would happen.
nuts.
It's
Nuts.
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You have Jim Herd take over WCW. One, Ric Flair, who had been the top guy in NWA, WCW for the better part of a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote I have here is that Jim Herd wanted him to cut the hair, rename himself Spartacus, to change with the times.
I'm still what times?
I know.
The Roman the Roman era?
Is this BC you're talking about?
When were the Roman days?
Long time ago, Steve.
Long time ago.
Very long time ago.
A couple decades ago, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if we ever got Jim Herd's side of this story. Like, did he? So there's no way in my mind that he would have expected the audience to believe that this was a new character. Yeah. So is this going to be a storyline where Flair, the character, just sort of reimagined himself and he was like, "Woo, call me Spartacus." You know, like that had to have been it, right?
Well, maybe
wear an earring and cut your hair.
Maybe it's a situation where Jim Herd either didn't want to or couldn't outright tell Ric Flair, "We're not putting you on TV anymore." This is just speculation. I have no insight.
Oh yeah, no, do it.
And pitched to him the absolute worst thing he could think of.
Yeah.
So Flair would quit.
Or the first thing he saw, like the TV was on in the background. And Spartacus
he had
was
that
on.
Kirk Douglas movie on. Even though Kirk Douglas, he had hair in that movie. I don't know where
wasn't
cutting
long
the hair
though. Wasn't long hair.
Or a situation where Flair then, if he refused to go along with what Jim Herd said, then Herd would be able to fire him. You know, it essentially set up Ric Flair to either one way or the other leave. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. I got a quote here from Arn Anderson, not Jim Herd, but Arn Anderson. That confirms more or less what you just said about the quote from Flair about the haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a brand new character? Like people would just be like, "You're Ric Flair." And he's like, "No, I'm not. I'm Spartacus." Woo!
Oh, here we go. This is from 2020. Jim Herd. This is from Fightful.
Oh, nice. What did he have to
Work
say?
link. Jim Herd, we never considered changing Ric Flair's name to Spartacus. This is from, speaking to Conrad.
Made that shit up.
Conrad Thompson says, when you're brainstorming those things, you get all kinds of feedback from those guys. That's where the lie that I wanted to change Ric Flair's name came from. That came from one of the meetings, but it was never considered. One of the things that was considered, and he didn't like it, so it became, there was a wrestler we were going to call the Zodiac Man. Every match, at the end of the match, you could go out the door and they would throw these discs that were redeemable at fast food places. They would catch them, and if you could prove you were oh my gosh.
Prove what?
You prove you were a Leo after the match, you get another disc. It got so complicated, but this name was going to change every month with a different promotion. I think Rick heard we wanted him to be the Zodiac Man. It was just another lie that came out of those meetings. A lot of it was tongue-in-cheek in those meetings.
I am so confused about this fast food offer.
Yeah.
Because I'm a Virgo, does that mean I have to wait until like, when do
I
I
get
my
period? Those 28 days or however long it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then apparently there's discs involved, and you can prove that you're the sign you are. You get more discs. But at what point do you redeem the disc for your fast food? That seems to be the end game of that, right?
If it's the Zodiac, shouldn't you just have to solve a cipher of some sort?
You would think so.
Oh my gosh.
Wasn't Beefcake?
Yeah, he was Zodiac.
He ended up being Zodiac in WCW,
At some
wasn't
point. He? Not the Zodiac Killer.
No.
Just a wrestler named the Zodiac.
Yeah, just wrestler named Zodiac.
Yeah. Anyways.
What a weird
that was
story.
Hilarious. Yeah, that is like the weirdest. That is the fucking weirdest.
Very strange.
Anyways, let's move on to number 4.
4.
Hall and Nash leave WWE. Diesel and Razor Ramon.
Hey, yo.
They leave because
Guaranteed
WCW
contracts. That's why, Steve.
Because they wanted all that money.
Yep.
You should go over there. You're a former champion. They'll give you a lot of money. So, yeah, man. Of course, obviously, Diesel with that 1-year title run. WCW opening up their pocketbooks, trying to get those characters to come over as the people they actually were. I don't know, like in Kevin Nash's state, like it was interesting because Scott Hall coming to WCW, he tried to do the accent first. But like with Diesel, there's nothing really he could do except be truck.
Yeah. But then that's a little too close to the idea, because at first they were really walking the fine line of these are the same characters from WWE, but they're not. They were trying to imply that Razor Ramon and Diesel were there. But if Kevin Nash comes out, a little too on the nose,
Like he showed like, oh my God, what's getting Jimmy Hart's like, oh God, somebody's showing up in the back. And you go to the loading docks or the loading area. Right? Yeah. And Big Diesel shows up and he gets out and he's like, how's it going? Big Daddy. Did he called himself Big Daddy Cool in, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Big Daddy Cool here. Big Daddy Cold here. Yeah, that'd have been a bit on the nose.
Yeah,
but like with Scott Hall, like the accent was everything. The accent was the character.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I wonder if he could have, if he just completely went in on the accent. If he was like, what's that dude that did Elvis, and then he claimed that his voice was forever changed because he did Elvis' voice so much.
Well, I've never heard that story before.
What's the kid that played?
Oh,
Elvis,
Austin Butler.
Austin Butler.
Oh, he really said that?
Yeah, he was like, man, I did that Elvis voice so much it now just sounded like Elvis.
He didn't sound like Elvis in Dune 2.
Well, maybe he did Dune 2 character so much now he's gonna sound like that guy.
Maybe, I don't know. It'd be pretty interesting if he.
There's so much sand out here, baby.
If he's out on the Harkonnen homeworld in like a gladiator stadium.
Yeah. Viva Las Vegas. Oh man, so much sand out here.
Together.
It's like Vegas out here, man. There's so much sand.
I hadn't heard that
I
story
want some peanut butter. Give me a peanut butter worm. Anyways. So yeah, Hall and Nash, they leave. The first big, deal. Well, Lex Luger, I guess, is the first big deal, but Hall and Nash were like a big deal.
Yeah, massive deal. Diesel was actually WWF champion.
He actually did get the championship.
And their arrival to WCW kickstarted the NWO storyline. That was kind of a major deal.
Well, it's also interesting because like those two guys would have fit in so perfectly during the Attitude Era of WWF. Instead, they were in the Nitro Era of WCW, as Eric Bischoff likes to say now, apparently. But they would have fit right in. I mean, if you look at, good Lord. If you like what they could have done as DX with the 4 of those guys, oh my God. Like that would have been the biggest thing ever. That would have been like super over. But yeah, let me ask you this. That accent, I know a lot of people swear by it. I thought that Scott Hall Razor Ramon accent was goofy as fuck. Do you think he would have kept it if he would have stayed in WWF for the Attitude Era and joined DX?
No, at a certain point he would have dropped it.
They would have dropped it?
Yeah, he would
have
dropped
made some like jokes about it?
Yeah.
I'm not playing by your rules anymore, Vince McMahon.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm not Cuban.
Yeah, something like that.
That's appropriation. All right, let's move on to number 3. CM Punk walks out on WWE. Also, CM Punk is fired by AEW.
What happened in 2014? What happened in 2013?
Yeah, man.
Almost 10 years apart.
2024 and 2014 and 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2024 now. Summer of 2023, he got fired. So, let's go back to Royal Rumble 24. Sorry, 2014 is what I meant to say. He got it concussed during the match.
Hot off a hot Ryback feud.
Oh, yeah. And
the second one in 12 months, by the way.
And the next night on Raw, He's trying to make his case. Hey, I'm concussed. I shouldn't be wrestling, so on and so forth.
Shit my pants.
Get into an argument with Triple H and Vince. I guess the topic of what Punk's plans were at WrestleMania 30 came up, which was him versus Triple H. Punk famously said, I don't need you. I need to wrestle you. You need to wrestle me. And he left.
Yeah.
Walked
Triple
out.
H is like, I don't get it. We'd be wrestling each other. It doesn't make any sense.
I know. It's like, that's not how wrestling works, Phil. We got to wrestle each other.
The thing we wrestle each other, though, that's a thing.
We're on
the same page.
As Punk explained it on the Art of Wrestling podcast, it wasn't like he was leaving for good.
Right, yeah.
He just had enough. He was beat up. He needed time to rest, and over the course of his run from 2011 to 2014, he suffered several injuries, and every time Vince is like, "We need you, pal.
We need you, pal."
And
well, you need me to do. It's funny, man. Somebody mentioned. Sorry, not to cut you off, but somebody mentioned on Wrestle Juice that it was a hot takes thing. They were like, the 434 days of CM Punk's title reign was the most memorable thing about the 434 days, that it was so long. I went back, bro. It's so true, though. And with exception, like he wrestled Bryan, I think, Cena here and there.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at his the actual matches, the feuds he was in during that time, bro, it's the lineup of guys you have no desire to see. Del Rio, Ziggler, Big Show.
Ryback.
There's the Jericho thing. Lots of Ryback. Yeah, it's for reals. Like they kind of wasted that for it. The best thing he did was when he lost the title to The Rock, when he had that great promo about boxing with God or whatever it was.
Yeah, when he turned heel on him. Yeah.
Anyways, that's a side note here, but I thought that was an interesting take because I was like, that's kind of true.
I mean, he did like when him and Heyman were, pairing up. When it was heel,
fun because you could tell they liked it.
Yeah, they had great chemistry, obviously, because they're friends.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, Punk left in 2014 with the intention, or at least not with intention, of walking out for good. And then, he ends up getting fired via FedEx on his wedding day.
Yeah.
The fact that someone like Punk was on top of the company for 3+ years, it kind of goes back to the Mox thing to say, I'm fed up, I'm out.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Was pretty darn surprising, and to hear he got fired, and even the idea. I mean, he kind of said it. I think in the lead up to his UFC fights, it's like, I'm done with pro wrestling. I don't want to do it anymore. So he seemed dedicated to learning how to fight.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty surprising when he came back and came to AEW. And then obviously Brawl Out, so on and so forth. All that happened. The fight backstage at All In with Jack Perry ultimately led to him being fired by AEW on the eve of All Out 2023. And now he's back in WWE, something I never would have thought would have happened even 5 years ago. Heck, 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I always kind of figured that Triple H, even though even he said the other day, we were never on the same, or we were on the same page, but in very different ways. I don't know. He said it in a very weird way.
You say we were on the same page, but different books or something like that?
Something like that. But he's got his own poetic way of saying things. Triple H does. More but better. With Vince McMahon there, like day-to-day running things, I always thought I would have been shocked. Because even during the backstage days with CM Punk, it seemed like he was trying to get in the company. It feels like, and I don't know, it feels like Vince McMahon was just anti, And I kind of would have been surprised for that to have worked. Even if Vince was like, yeah, come back, especially now that things are on the outs with AEW, there's going to be a big reaction for you. For that to work, though, I think probably would have been really difficult. We would have already been doing Punk dailies.
Yeah.
But under Triple H, clearly things are much different. Triple H said as much. CM Punk has said as much. They had the makeup phone call, and now they just seem to be excited to be working together because it seems like they have some very similar philosophies on how to get things done. Shawn Michaels included there in NXT. It seems like they've got very similar philosophies with how to program your wrestling television. And so at this point, it's awesome to see, and it makes it like less surprising to me that happened. But yeah, especially with Vince McMahon there, while a lot of that stuff was happening, I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. But given how much things went bad in AEW, yeah, it was kind of surprising to see WWE be like, yeah, come on over here. But seems to be an absolute masterstroke, you know.
So
hopefully
far
the guy can stay healthy now.
Yeah, so long as Punk can stay healthy, you got to expect to see some good stuff happening once he's cleared from his latest injury and can actually have a match with Drew McIntyre.
Absolutely.
And who knows where
Let's
it goes
go ahead
from
and move
there.
on to number 2. Cody Rhodes leaves AEW. Boy, this one was shocking. This one was
It was early
fucking
2022
shocking.
where we start hearing Cody's done with AEW. We're like, nah.
In talks with WWE.
He started the
What?
company. Why would he leave so soon? A mere 3 years after they started. Seems like there's so much more he could do.
Little did we know.
Little
he
did we
started
know.
AEW exclusively to get a huge offer from WWE and finish it.
But yes, I think it was February of 2022 around there. I started hearing that he was not going to renew his deal, seeming like he was coming back to WWE. And he's since spoken about it, but in very vague terms in terms of why he left. He always just says it was a personal issue between himself and Tony Khan. He's never gone to specifics, nor has Tony Khan gone to specifics, and that is their right, obviously. You know, they don't owe us any explanation.
Says you.
But still, super surprising, given that he started a whole new company to compete with WWE. He took a sledgehammer and smashed Triple H's throne at Double or Nothing 2019. He took some shots at WWE during his time in AEW. And in the end, went back. And, you know, his first promo back after he faced Seth at WrestleMania 38, when he talked about the motivation, at least in terms of storyline. And I'm sure there's some truth to this.
Yeah.
About wanting to come to WWE to win the title his father never got.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that immediately, I think, strikes a chord with just about anybody. Everybody gets that.
Yeah.
But, man, that whole stretch between when the first rumors were starting to trickle out that he was leaving to when he actually debuted at Mania, or re-debuted at Mania 38, at least once a week, Cody was on the thumbnail, it felt like, for us.
Oh, during that period
At
of
least.
time, dude, it was at least. That was, yeah, Cody was the thumbnail back then. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was multiple times a week, I think, at least. So, yeah, his last match was January 26th, the Beach Break show. He lost the TNT title to Sammy Guevara. in that ladder match. And then February 15th, 2022, sources reported, this is from Wikipedia, that him and his wife Brandy had left the promotion as they were unable to come to terms on a new contract. And it was like, they just need to get together on the same page. There's no way he's going to leave. You got to wonder if, you know, I don't know. I have no idea, zero clue what the EVP's contracts sort of look like. But if there was any amount of like, hey, you know, you guys, we're going to build this thing together, at some point we'll include some, like, I don't know, escalators or ownership stakes even.
Yeah.
And if that would have been part of the deal, if he would have been more incentivized to see it through even further.
I don't know. You know, again, neither he or Tony Khan have ever divulged what this personal matter was that kept him from, and maybe given how it's phrased, it's kind of gotten blown up out of proportion a little bit. Maybe the personal matter was simply, I want to get this belt my dad never won, you know. It felt like there was a personal issue between them, even though Cody's always spoke very highly of Tony Khan.
I will, dude, you're right. Like, we don't know. Some point somebody will probably write a book. But if you look at, and I said this like half tongue in cheek way back then, Cody was the guy backstage. And it seemed entirely likely that a lot of the booking decisions he had a lot of influence over because he knew how to do that stuff. My own personal speculation has always been, once Tony Khan understood how to do it, then he was like, this is going to be my thing now. Like, I want to run this, thank you for your assistance.
Mm-hmm.
But then Cody's like, I wrote myself out of the world title picture. And I know it's wrestling, do that back, but he's also got the weird ethics about pro wrestling stories. So in my opinion, it seems so likely that it had something to do with the amount of involvement he had backstage versus Tony Khan. I could be completely and totally fucking incorrect about that. I am merely a person on the outside looking in. But when you connect the dots on, what we saw during that time, it wouldn't shock me if that was the case.
Or played a role, at least, in it. Yeah, that's entirely possible.
Or played a role.
It's
yeah,
entirely
but
possible. We don't know.
In terms of a personal issue, yeah, dude, I don't know. Maybe one day we'll find out. Maybe not. But
Maybe
yeah,
not.
that was a shock.
It was.
That was a shock.
It really was.
Great for our business too. Let's go ahead and move on to number one, brother. Hulkamania runs dry in WWE. What you gonna do when the fans stop cheering for you, brother?
Go do a TV show. And then go to WCW.
Yeah.
So it was weird because, like, at WrestleMania 8, it was being set up as Hogan's retiring.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, right.
This is it. Hogan's done after, 8 years. Basically being champ the entire time. I know he wasn't champ the entire time, but basically those 8 years, he's probably champ at least 6.5 of them. And him and Vince were the two probably most responsible for taking wrestling from a regional business to a national one.
Yep.
And to see him Hogan depart WWE was pretty surprising, even if it was to transition into acting. It was still surprising to see him walk away from his wrestling career to a degree. Obviously, Hulkamania wasn't running wild like it used to by the time 92 and 93 rolled around. But Vince still thought enough of Hogan's drawing power to bring him back for WrestleMania 9 and also for the European tour that followed.
You love that story.
I love that story.
Well, what's interesting is when you look at WrestleMania 9, when he came back, looked like a different person because he was, who knows what he was going into his body at the time, or wasn't going into his body at the time. He came back, and the silly WrestleMania 9, main event, his cash-in, if you will.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it.
It seemed like, Vince was like, you know what, I'm not ready for this Bret Hart thing. I'm going to go to something that is shocking and familiar. And the crowd fucking ate it up there in the moment at the place because it's like you're watching cash-in. And so he wins the title, but by June at King of the Ring, boy, that honeymoon period did not last long because it was at the time the lowest attended pay-per-view in the history of WWE.
Yeah.
I think it was like 6,000 people, 5,000, something like that.
5,000 and change, I think.
And they did a thing to get the title onto Yokozuna so that eventually Bret could beat him. And so it was not very long before, and hey, maybe Pritchard was onto something when it came to the European tour and it was only meant to be a short thing to add ticket value. I don't know. But for whatever reason, at that point, Hulkamania had pretty much run dry. Like you said, they marketed WrestleMania 8 as his, retirement deal. And then he left, and the new generation was right over the horizon. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to me, though, and I think it's sort of an indictment on, the storytelling prowess of Vince McMahon even back then, that it had been 8 years, and you're right, for 6.5 he was champion, but it was very copy paste.
Oh yeah.
And in fact, during the middle of that spell in 1990, there was time for a change, and the fans were rooting for the other guy more than Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior. And they did the change, and then Warrior was, smoke and mirrors. So they went back to Hogan, but at no point in that span of time was there like, oh, let's try to freshen things up. Let's try to do something new here. It's like, we don't have any other ideas, and Hogan's probably just feeling really safe doing what he does. And it turns out there was more gas left in his tank, because then 2 years later or a year and a half later, he goes to WCW, and at first they couldn't figure it out because they wanted to do the same thing. But then once he went NWO, it was like a whole second career for him.
Yeah.
And then that led to him going back to WWE after, WCW got bought. And you saw there was even more juice left in the tank, a little bit less this time. But yeah, it was you got to think that the dude had more left. It's just Vince McMahon not really knowing what else to do with them.
Yeah, it was definitely a pattern, and it was kind of the inverse of what was the typical pattern in the NWA, where there it was heel champion, babyface's chase.
Yeah.
Well, Vince turned that around. Babyface champion will bring in new heels to feud with babyface champion for 2 or 3, 4 months. They'll move on to something else. We'll bring another heel in, or elevate another heel from the mid card. But yeah, it wasn't a situation where, barring a few circumstances, there was intricate stories being told. I mean, maybe you had the Macho Man Mega Power story that was really well done.
The Mega Powers was, and that
for the time especially.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, and I wonder if it was a matter of, when somebody else became more popular than Hogan, maybe something woke up in Vince and he was like, I can't roll with this guy, and this is what he is, and I don't see any money in a heel run, and maybe Hogan was resistant to that. I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure maybe some shit's been written. I'm sure Hogan's book can probably be taken factually accurate. I probably wouldn't rely on that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, they did tell some stories, like the Mega Powers was a good story. You had like the Andre the Giant stuff was really, really good.
Yeah.
I mean, you had some turds in there as well, but there's also the matter of like when Vince would come up with a heel that the people were starting to get into, like Jake the Snake. It's like, whoa, buddy, no, we're pulling back on this one, because he was getting more over than Hogan. So yeah, I don't know. Vince is a guy who wakes up, and he's like, oh, now I want to do something different than I wanted to do yesterday, and maybe who knows what that factored into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly end of an era for WWF and Hulk Hogan there in 1993.
Indeed.
Yeah, man. Anyways, that's it for this episode of Count Out. Let us know what your guys' most shocking departures are in the world of wrestling. Let us know about what we talked about today. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that subscribe. Thanks for watching. Till next time, we'll see you guys around.
Goodbye.